Welcome to FDA Imports, cross-border compliance with attorney Benjamin L. England.
Today's episode is FDA Imports. I'm your host, Abigail Vaca. Welcome, Ben.
Hi, how are you doing, Abigail? Good to see you.
I'm great. It's wonderful to see you too. So, Ben, could you start by explaining what reciprocal tariffs means in the context of international trade and how it differs from standard tariffs?
Sure. And I'm going to probably have my guest. This is my first time ever having a guest on this podcast. Sergio Lozano, a customs broker in Miami, Alpha broker. I have Sergio probably also help me answer some of these questions. So a reciprocal tariff is sort of like what it sounds, right? So you do something and therefore I do something. That's different than your basic tariff structure. The basic tariffs that most countries charge in one form or fashion are connected through agreements, whether through the World Customs Organization, World Trade Organization, or individual agreements between companies, like bilaterals or trilateral agreements. And that's where the tariffs sort of arise. They're policy driven, and consequently, administration to administration, there can be changes, but it's pretty rare for there to be extreme changes. A reciprocal tariff is basically responding to how other countries are tariffing, are charging duty or other charges against the goods that we export to them. And so it is much more ordinarily, it tends to be more surgical, although these don't sound very surgical, but they tend to be more surgical. I'm with Sergio. Welcome, Sergio. Glad you could join us.
Thank you, Ben, for having me on.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any other kind of comments or response to that first question.
Well, yeah, no, the key question I see is, and I'm getting this question a lot by importers, is what does reciprocal mean? And when it comes to the word reciprocality and reciprocal tariffs, I don't think up to this date I've ever seen countries do reciprocating tariffs in any way, shape, or form. And the definition, I have not found a specific legal definition for what reciprocal tariffs would mean. So based off of that, you have to go looking for what could it mean and prepare your clients in a position where if reciprocating tariffs mean this, then here are the consequences and this is how they can be implemented. Or reciprocating tariffs can mean this other situation, and prepare your clients so they have a general understanding of how one or the other could be the way reciprocating tariffs could end up coming out.
Quick point. Sergio is a customs broker. He's using the word client and he just used the word legal. Sergio is also an attorney. So I'm an attorney in the FDA customs space. Sergio is an attorney, licensed attorney, also both of us licensed in Florida. And he's also a customs broker, a licensed customs broker. So he has clients as a broker and he also has clients as an attorney. And so that's why occasionally you're going to hear legal speak between the two of us. But don't worry, don't try it at home, right? We do this together because we're both licensed to do it. So
thank you for that clarification, Ben.
Where and how does President Trump find these reciprocal tariffs to target? And what kinds of things is he specifically referring to?
Yeah, and this is pretty important. Sergio brought this to my attention about a week ago. So we're talking about very early March. And after listening to the president's most recent speech to Congress, to the joint session, where he used very, very specific words, that is what sort of triggered the thinking in Sergio's mind with respect to what could he possibly be talking about when figuring out what a reciprocal tariff is, because as he pointed out, there's no legal definition for it because it's not the ordinary way the countries interact with each other. Sergio, I actually want you to sort of go through the words you heard from the president and then talk a little bit about the kinds of things that might fall within the money paid by importers or by U.S. exporters to other countries when exporting goods that could fall into this bucket.
Okay, that's exactly what we talked about last week. And one of the key pieces is reading the language that President Trump used in that speech. And specifically, being very direct about using specific terms and not just jumbling them all into one specific word. I'm looking at here the transcript as it's on the New York Times, and it shows it is unfair. India charges us auto tariffs higher than 100%. China average tariff on our products is twice that we charge them. And South Korea, average tariff is 4 times higher. Think of that, 4 times higher. And we give so much help militarily and in so many ways to South Korea. But what happens? This happens by friend and foe. Right there, he's talking specifically about our tariff structure compared to the tariff structures of other countries. And he's, at least what I'm seeing here, is he's telling you it's not just who we consider our friends and who we consider our foes. It's just in general in the tariff structure of different countries for barriers to trade. He then goes as far as into this next paragraph where he says, this system is not fair to the United States. Never was. And so on April 2nd, I wanted to make it April 1st, but I didn't want to be accused of April Fool's Day. I think that's a key thing that we can discuss a little bit later, Ben. And he goes, it's not. It's just one day, which cost us a lot of money, but we're going to do it in April. I'm a very superstitious person. April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs kick in. And whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth. He then goes even further and says, whatever they tax us, we will tax them. If they do non-monetary tariffs to keep us out of their markets, then we will do non-monetary barriers to keep them out of our markets. Ben, if you want to kind of jump into a discussion on this.
Yeah. A couple of things here. One, clearly this is not the way ordinarily people think of in terms of tariffs and duties that companies would pay when importing product. They don't think about the other things. So he mentioned non-monetary, he mentioned taxes, and of course he's mentioning tariffs. And you're interpreting those to be different things. So can you give me like just examples of what might fall into things other than what's ordinarily a tariff?
Okay, so a tariff is a number, an HS code, so a specific code that represents a particular product that you have to declare to U.S. Customs and to other government agencies at the time of import. However, taxes are additional taxes that are charged on that import if that product were to come into a different country. Example, VAT tax, a value-added tax that certain countries have. There are other barriers. For example, in certain countries, they may have a non-monetary barrier that you have to have a pre-approval or a certification to ensure that that product could come in because it could affect the nation that the U.S. product would be going into. Those would be examples of a non-monetary tariff. Taxes, different countries have different tax codes for product coming in. And based off of a government database, we have been able to find that certain countries have a tariff and up to 3 to 5 different taxes before any product could come in. That's not even taking into consideration that the U.S. bases their entire tariff system on FOB, freight on board value, versus cost insurance and freight value. Mm-hmm. In and of itself, that is a way of changing dutiable rates.
Okay, I do want to unpack some of that. I think that first we're going to talk a little bit about some of the examples. You and I talked about, I think it was Brazil, we talked about China, we talked about there's a number of different countries, India, a number of countries that have some of these additional charges that are beyond tariffs. Like they're not just the duty. It also would be applied in many cases, irrespective of the HTS code, right? I mean, some of these fees have to do with the container ship or have to do with the use of the port or don't some of these fees are not even related to the harmonized tariffs?
Correct. Some of them are, and certain countries have removed some of those fees depending on an HS code. So it may not be related, but they've actually, in order to be able to either allow a product into the market or prevent a product into a market, they may keep those taxes versus removing those taxes in certain situations.
You mentioned approvals and certifications. Obviously, there's a lot of, U.S. Department of Agriculture is a really good example. There's a lot of permitting that's required when you import product from other countries. So we do that. Right, wouldn't that fall into our side of a non-monetary based expense or tariff?
I mean, yes, that could be one example of a non-monetary expense or tariff. Another example of that is FDA registrations. It's a barrier that you have to meet certain requirements for the health and for the facilities that need to be properly registered to bring product into the country.
The United States government, when they negotiate free trade agreements, FDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture is at the table. FDA is not. There's no HHS, there's no FDA at the table. They don't have trade promotion authority. So the registration, right? The fact that a foreign manufacturer of a medical device must register their facility if they want to export the device to the United States to the tune of $9,000 a year. That would be partly monetary and partly non-monetary, and it would, right? And if it was reversed, then the other country could say, okay, look, we're going to charge you for all the medical devices that are coming here for the same reason that you're charging our medical device companies to export there. Could they do that?
Based off of the word reciprocal, I can see it going one way or the other. That's the hard part here, is that we're trying to dissect something that we haven't seen occur. up until this point.
Yeah, and I want to get to the database point first, but before I do, I want to say, before the comment section starts filling up about like fact checking everything that Donald Trump said in his speech, we're not talking about the facts that he said in his speech. We're trying to interpret his words with respect to what might be covered, right? How it is, how far he might reach. And you gave me a really good sort of shocking example. I think it was Brazil, where you said that on top of duty, right, tariffs, there are also something like, you said 3, 4, 5 during this, you may have said 9, I can't remember the number, but there's a larger number of fees that are paid by U.S. companies when they export into Brazil. Can you give a couple examples of that?
So I'll give you an example specifically for Brazilian seafood, one particular product being tilapia. Due to the fact that there is no free trade agreement between Brazil and the United States, it would pay a 9% duty based off of a tariff at cost insurance freight. It then would have an automated system clearance fee, which gives you a formula of how it would be reached. It then has a CONFINS tax of 9.65, a PIS tax of 2.1, a sea freight additional charge, and it's an 8% tax charged on an international sea freight value, a storage fee tax of 1%, and it gives you a formula, a ICMS VAT tax of 17%, and that VAT tax is based off of the CIF price plus the duty price. So that's
compound. That's compounding. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Now we want to compare that to a different country that's bringing in that exact same product.
So that was duty plus 6 other charges, some of which are on top of each other, and consequently they're accumulating, they're compounding.
Correct.
Which the 9% sounded bad, right? But now we've got to be up to what, 90%? Maybe 75, 80%. We didn't add it up, but you could add it up.
I didn't add it up, but I'm going to tell you, it's altogether an effective barrier to entry. Is pretty high to bring the same product that Brazilians bring into the United States. So if there's reciprocal tariffs are HS code by HS code, you're talking what it would take American tilapia to enter that market, it would be what we just discussed.
We would charge that back on material on the code, that tilapia coming from Brazil, for instance. And I do want to hear another example as a comparison. But before we sort of leave this one, your point is that when you read President Trump's transcript and you get into his very, very carefully, specifically worded statements of if they, we will, he's identified these in terms of tariffs, taxes, and non-monetary charges or expenses. And so you didn't even get to the non-monetary charges and expenses with Brazil. You only got to the monetary ones, duty plus some taxes and fees.
Correct.
So there would be more, most likely, too, on Brazil.
Well, on Brazil, based off of the database, I don't see a non-monetary tariff in the database
for tilapia.
For tilapia. So we're talking about a very particular product, not just any product. But in this other comparison, I can show you that there is difference even within one country. So we just talked about Brazil tilapia.
Yeah.
Colombia tilapia.
Okay.
Due to the fact that we have a free trade agreement with Colombia, it pays no duty.
Is that through CAFTA?
That is through, not CAFTA, through the U.S.-Colombia Free Trade Agreement.
That's bilateral.
Correct. The bilateral trade agreement between the U.S. and Colombia. It is free and it has no additional duties, no additional charges.
Good.
Now, let's take this same country and let's talk about flowers from this country.
From Colombia.
From Colombia. Roses coming from Colombia is duty-free because there's no tariff due to the Colombian Free Trade Agreement. But there is the IVA, which is a VAT tax, which is 19% of the dutiable value.
Going into Colombia?
Going into Colombia. So 2 different products, 2 completely different sections of the HS code within Colombia's HS system. One pays VAT, one doesn't.
Plus any other fees or charges that might be, freight.
From the database, these are the only database. From this database, this is what I'm able to see, and I don't see anything other than the tariff and that tax.
Yeah. So you brought up the database. Right? So explain to me a little bit. Is this in ACE? Where is this? And for those who are not customs sort of based people, there's a lot of data. Congress collects data. Census collects data. Of course, the various agencies that have jurisdiction over imported products that are not customs collect data, FDA, USDA, EPA, Fish and Wildlife, all sorts of agencies. And then customs collects data. But there's also data that is usually commerce is in charge of, which has to do with how to facilitate exports of our goods. This data is in a customs system, it's in commerce. Where is it?
I'm actually, I'd have to go look it up. I don't have it off the top of my head right now. I know that it is within the government database because it does end in GOV. So I know it's coming from a government database. Which particular department it's coming out of, I'd have to go look that up. I don't have that on me, but I would be happy to be able to go through it with you at some other time.
And so this is for the benefit of any exporter who's interested in perhaps shipping flowers to Colombia, then they would run the HTS code. It's HTS code specific.
I see it as HTS code specific, and you have to know how to properly classify different HTSs from different countries.
And interpret the data, properly interpret the data.
Exactly. For example, the US's entire HTS US system has heading, subheading, and statistically significant numbers. Mm-hmm. Different countries have other type of HS systems that include a certain set of codes that are harmonized and other sets of codes that are specific to the individual countries.
Extra, the extra portions of the code.
Correct.
I guess I want to come some other pieces here. So we know that there's different ways that the Trump may be interpreting or intending reciprocal tariffs to be interpreted. And consequently, if someone comes to you and says, well, what would it mean if I was importing tilapia from Brazil? I mean, this is my livelihood. What can I expect?
So I would, right now, I'm going to give the law school answer, which is it depends, which is the absolute horrible answer, but it does give everyone clarity. And what we try to do is we want to give them the different avenues. Reciprocal can mean tariff for tariff, meaning you do the exercise of saying this product has this HS code coming from Brazil to the United States. Say that the product, instead of coming from Brazil, comes from the US and is going to Brazil. See what the duties would be on an HS level specific number, and then calculate what that cost could be. That would be reciprocal tariff item for tariff item. What you charge us, we charge you on a tariff by tariff basis. What can it also mean? What imports come from the US? What exports leave the US to Brazil? See what those tariffs are, and then say 98% of the US product in Brazil is charged this amount in tariff, taxes, and non-monetary restrictions. Then come up with an average or come up with some sort of calculation that the government would have to have compared to the exports from Brazil that are readily being exported to the United States. That would be the second way. The third way is they can categorize it into agriculture, non-agriculture product, and find an average between the three. Those are what I believe are the three possible avenues. However, tariff by tariff, off of the language that I'm seeing in this address, is where I see it possibly going. And it at least gives us a baseline to look at every single product one by one and get an understanding. Because for an example, like we mentioned with Colombia, one product that is an agriculture product and another product that is an agriculture product, one was charged a VAT and the other one wasn't. So how would that determination be if it were to be on an import by export basis?
Trump actually, first of all, it seems to me that the only way you can sort of understand when he says that South Korea charges 4 times as much as we charge them, that the only way you can get to those kinds of numbers is if you're filling it up with things other than duty, right? That's the only way to. Now, whether he's right or not, that it's 4 times is a different question. But that's how, you have to have something to fill the bucket with in order to get the number higher. And it seems to me your point is, when you read what he's saying, this would be a way to get them. Am I interpreting what you're saying correctly?
Correct. And if you want, we could even go into specifically one of the things that he mentions about U.S. auto tariffs higher than 100% from India.
The other thing I think I would want to know, so one is, how does he get to those kinds of numbers? 2, if we learn anything from what we've seen in the first however many days that Trump's been in office, he can take a couple different approaches and be quite comfortable with them. He can take a very, very precise approach. He can take a blunt, sledgehammer approach. He can take a very broad, average, calculated approach. For instance, switching from FOB to CIF, that's a very broad way to increase the denominator upon which the tariff percentage is calculated, right? Those are the kinds of things that you can do. We'd be mistaken to think that he has to do a certain thing. Like, I don't think we can predict what he's doing as much as trying to come up with ways that he possibly could fill this bucket up with that much money. But let's do you have the Indian numbers there for auto?
Looking here at the India number, and again, I'd have to go HS code by HS code.
Yeah.
But it shows a general rate of 15%, then a social welfare surcharge of 10%, then a VAT of 28%. This is for a particular tariff. Could it be a different tariff? Yes. Sure. Could there be other machinery? And again, he mentions automobiles. He doesn't mention auto. So U.S. auto, is it just passenger vehicles? Is it different types of vehicles?
Yeah. Well, heavy equipment. Is it commercial equipment? Is it
correct?
Yeah. All of that goes into the classification. Yeah. So the 15%, the 28% plus the social. So 15 and 28% right there. It's 30 plus 15, roughly 45 minus 2, 43. That's 43%. And we're just talking about a tariff and a fee, a VAT, which is substantially more than probably what anybody reports ever ordinarily paying for duty, right, when they export products to India.
Correct. That same product coming from the U.S. pays 2.5%.
Yeah.
That same product coming into the United States pays 2.5%.
It's not even reciprocal, just even on the duty rate itself, if I'm not mistaken.
Now, looking at that language, and Ben, you tell me what you think about this.
Okay.
I'm reading what he's saying, and it says it's very unfair. India charges U.S. auto tariffs higher than 100%. So do you think he means 100% compared to what we charge them?
It would be more than that even too. Maybe he's doing a comparison. Maybe he's not. But
that's where the language might be blurry, where it's not that it's 100% tariff, but the U.S. charges 2.5 if India were to send us a car. Yet we're charged more than 100% because 100% would be 2.5. Would only be a 5%.
5, right? We're at 15. Yeah. So I mean, maybe. I mean, that's part of what we're trying to do is try to interpret. But I think the most important lesson is that there is duty. There are databases that you can look to in order to determine what it might mean when you're exporting. First of all, what it means now when people. This is like you're not talking about projected costs in Brazil, Colombia, India. These are now costs. This is duty plus VAT plus.
Correct.
Right? That's today. And so what your point is that Trump may be looking at all those kinds of numbers for creating reciprocity.
Correct. Now,
whether that's right or not is a policy question, and we're not getting into the policy questions. We're just trying to maybe interpret what it is that's going on.
Looking at Korea, it would be a VAT of 10%, and a United States free trade agreement with Korea would be free plus a 10%. So if we're going on 2.5 times 4 is?
10%.
There's the 4 times higher.
Yeah. So maybe that's what he's doing. And so now we're trying to read tea leaves, I think, a little bit.
Either of you have anything to add? Closing thoughts?
And final thoughts on this is, I'm a nerd for this. I really enjoy going into these details. But when he specifically mentions that he didn't want this to be an April Fool's joke, his words, not mine, and then follows that up with saying, it's just one day, which cost us, the U.S., a lot of money. If we look at that, you see this could significantly change the cost of imports into the country and exports out of other countries. So much so that he didn't want on April 1st people to think that he was kidding or that this is fake news that's being stated. He wanted to make sure everyone's clear. This did not happen as a joke. This is what this truly is, whatever that is going to be. I wish I could have a crystal ball that would say exactly where we're going to be on April 2nd, but all we can do is interpret and wait and see what we continue to hear from the Commerce Secretary, what we continue to hear from his cabinet.
Yeah. So my suggestion, I think, as we come back, maybe on April 3rd, let's come back and figure it out. I think we ought to maybe set some time aside and do that. And in closing, from my perspective, thanks, Sergio, for joining us. I appreciate it so much. I'm going to see Sergio in Boston this coming weekend at the seafood show, March 15, 16, 17, 16, 17, 18. And,
16, 17, 18.
Yep. And so we'll be talking. I'll have a panel there, and Sergio, you're going to join me there to talk to the seafood industry about this very same thing, which is why I wanted to get this out so we can at least get people looking at it and thinking about it. So thanks so much. Otherwise, everything related to FDA, customs, you come to FDAImports.com for everything related to those issues. And if you need a customs broker, let me know and I'll connect you.
Thank you for joining us for FDA Imports Cross-Border Compliance with Attorney Benjamin L. England. Like, subscribe, and leave us a review on your favorite platform. And you can find Benjamin on FDAImports.com.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.